think China's rise, as I always keep saying, was inevitable. It was unnatural for China to go from having 25 to 30% of the world's economy in 1820 to 2% in 1950. 2% was an unreal figure. So it's quite natural for China to go back up and achieve the world's largest economy. For the last 200 years, the number one power has always been a Western power. So even when number one power passed from the British to the Americans, it went from one Western power to another Western power. But now we are facing a transition for the first time in 200 years, where the number one power is going to be a non-Western power, which is China. And so this is something that the world hasn't dealt with for 200 years. And therefore, it's not surprising that many do not know how to handle this transition. It is inevitable that the United States would at some point become very concerned about China's rise. And when I spent 3 months in America, I was shocked to discover how frightened of China the Americans have become. And as a result, the anti-China sentiment has grown significantly in America. And so it is inevitable that America is going to look for new ways and means of counterbalancing China. And so the idea of Indo-Pacific, what's behind the Indo-Pacific, is a way to balance China's enormous growth. But at the same time, it will be wise for China not to react negatively to the idea of an Indo-Pacific, because if you look at the ancient history of Asia, many Chinese scholars, Xuanzang, used to travel from China through Southeast Asia to India to study. And there's a famous university called Nalanda University in Bihar. So the Indo-Pacific may be an idea that the Americans are creating, but it's also a good description of ancient Asian history. And it's good for us to recreate the old connections of the past. I think that it would be in India's national interest to work with China on the Belt and Road Initiative. But right now there is a small technical problem, which is that as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, China and Pakistan have established the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which goes through territory which is disputed between Pakistan and India. So as a result of that, I think natural that India has to object to that, but I think that can be overcome. And you can find ways and means of overcoming those differences and to focus on areas where they can work together. Because frankly, one thing that India needs very badly today is good infrastructure. And the infrastructure superpower of the world today is China. So a China-India partnership to build good infrastructure will be a tremendous boost to the Indian economy. So in some ways, the Belt and Road Initiative is also an Indo-Pacific idea, because the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is not just about the old Silk Road going across Central Asia, but there's also a maritime Silk Road that goes through Southeast Asia, through India, through the Middle East. So there's no incompatibility behind the BRI idea and Belt and Road Initiative and the Indo-Pacific idea. I think there is no, if you look at China's long history, if China had had the same imperialist instincts, global imperial instincts, as the Western countries, Australia should have been a Chinese country. But instead, Australia was a Western country because the British colonizers came all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific to colonize Australia. So I think There hasn't been traditionally this impulse in Chinese history to go out around the world and to conquer the world. And so that's something that I think that long history of China, I think, is a reassuring sign for the world that when China becomes a great power, it will not try to repeat what the West did at the height of its power and colonize the world. But we are at a fork in the road. So if the US and China, for example, and this can happen, decide to go for zero-sum competition, where a win for one is a loss for the other, then it will be a very troubled world. And you'll see lots of geopolitical turbulence around the world. But if you take the other road, and if the US and China decide that yes, they have differences, they will compete in some areas, there will be economic competition. Economic competition is good for the world, but there will be no military war or military containment policies. Then you could have overall a more stable world order. But nobody knows what's going to happen, because the American leaders don't know what China is going to do, and they don't know what they will do. And China's leaders also do not know what America's leaders will do, nor can they predict how they will respond to this too.